Hello and welcome to Kirtan London Journey to Joy podcast, episode number 24, with your host, Madhva, and my current co-host and dear friend, Acyuta Gopi, who we're extremely fortunate to have with us as we go through chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita. Firstly, welcome again, Acyuta. So nice to have you.
Thank you.
Dear friends, we are still in chapter 8. We're coming towards the end of it. But before we go any further into that, we're going to start, as we always do, with an invocation prayer, which is a prayer or mantra that we chant as we are asking or offering our respects to our teachers and asking for their blessings, because we do that before any type of spiritual activity, and trying to dive into the Gita is for sure a spiritual activity. And it's tradition that Acyuta chants the invocation for us. So please, Acyuta, I'd love for you to take it away.
Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Jai. Welcome, Acyuta. How are you?
Always good to be here. Super glad, as always.
Such a legend. I was just listening to the previous episode, checking in on what we were discussing. We talked about some really cool stuff last episode. I loved how we finished as well. I feel like we finished on a really beautiful topic. We were talking about this well, we were speaking about bhakti outside of bhakti, in a sense. So this idea of devotion within all faiths. And today should be an interesting episode because we go further into the power of bhakti, or if you were trying to translate that into English, loving devotion for God. Possibly one of my best attempts at a translation for the word bhakti. So very interesting stuff. Any thoughts, any reflections before we dive in today from last time?
Actually, I'm just kind of like, I'm like ready and eager to dive in. Like, let's do it. Let's see what happens.
Okay, so then let's start with today's episode. Let's go. For you guys want to hear what happened last time, you got to watch last time. Okay, that's episode right. Number 23. Let's go. Right, let's do it.
So we're kind of at text 22. And in the same, like, I mean, we can do 22 by itself, and then the last, I think 23 through 28, we can kind of put together, and we'll see what we get. So starting with
what does 22. That mean?
I know. Does that mean we're coming to the end of the chapter?
That's the end of the chapter, Acyuta. Oh no. Okay. All right. Just ignore that for now.
So let's see. 22.
Okay.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attained by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading, and everything is situated within him. I really like this. You know, I feel like Bhagavad Gita gives us some really cool, like, science words, like unalloyed. Nobody uses that. Who uses that? And then, you know, whenever you see somebody use it, it always makes me like remember Prabhupada. And I'm always like, huh, Look at that. Regular people using these words too. But there's something about
Yeah, it's
this word,
true.
like,
You never hear that.
yeah, right? Like unalloyed. And it's a word that we've kind of grown up with. But, what does that mean for regular people? Something that is not mixed, right? You've got an alloy of metals. Normally you hear about it in terms of like mixing metals and metallurgy. And now you don't have any of that. Something that is just quintessentially you, which I really, really love about this verse. Basically, Krishna's like, be unfiltered, be completely concentratedly you. You
Mm,
don't have to be watered down. You don't have to be like filtered through somebody else's lens of what spirituality
mm.
is. Your devotion, as it is, all of your devotion and all its complexities and layers, he's like, that's the way to attain me.
Very beautiful. Yeah. We sometimes fall into the trap of the the box image of what devotion looks like. I'm hearing hearing you say this, but what you're saying is actually you just have to offer your full self. Whatever you are, you offer that. It's not that you have to try and pretend to be someone else because it looks like they have devotion packaged very nicely. What's your package of devotion? You just present that in its full self, and that's all you have to do.
Yeah, and that's, that for me is when we hear about um, devotional service and worship and loving devotion being unmotivated and uninterrupted in order to fully satisfy the self, right? That's a verse from first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam,
Yeah.
which is like this ultimate dharma, this ultimate occupation, the purpose, right? The true calling of the soul is giving that uniquely packaged devotion, unmotivated and uninterrupted. And what I like is it gets so much more difficult to give unmotivated and uninterrupted if we are giving somebody else's version of devotion.
Yeah.
When we're giving our own, we don't have to fit into anything.
Easier said than done, perhaps.
Yeah, of course.
If you were to give any tips or advice on how people might move toward that, how they navigate the challenge of being genuinely themselves, which is firstly a topic, and then secondly, learning to offer that in devotion to, say the word, to God, something greater, however you see it. Would you have any tips or advice on how someone may do that?
Yeah, it's the same way we try and move through life authentically, right?
Mm,
Constantly asking ourselves, is this my view or is this somebody else's view projected on me that I'm now living out?
mm,
Um, we see it a lot with, parents living vicariously through their children, wanting them to live up to a certain set life that they've built up for them. And then the child goes, but yeah, you're projecting all this on me. I've got to live authentically. And so there's this constant longing to find that authentic path. And it's the same in spirituality. But it can be as simple as asking ourselves, is this current model sustainable for me?
yeah.
Can I continue? And that's the thing about
Right. That's a great
uninterrupted,
question. Mm,
right? You want something uninterrupted, which means
mm,
your devotion has to be sustainable for you. And the things that come naturally to us are much more sustainable than trying to impress some new model and formula on ourselves and then fit into that formula. That becomes something much less sustainable, much more difficult to keep up with. When we think about resolutions, we have a hard time keeping up with them because sometimes they're just not authentic. They're the things that we think we want, but when we get down to like, okay, no, what is it authentically that we actually need? Some of
yeah.
those things come And those changes become a lot more sustainable when we get really real with ourselves about it.
Okay. This is great. This is great. And it triggers another question in me, which is, how do you balance pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, learning new things, adopting things which are going to be good for you, which might not be comfortable, might not be what you're familiar with, and then also maintaining your own integrity. But you might have what you think is integrity with yourself, but perhaps it's laziness. Let's say, for example, you don't want to push yourself beyond a comfort zone, something like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So funny. I was just thinking about that, and I was just kind of posting about that earlier.
Yeah.
There are some times when we think such and such time will be the perfect time for me to surrender or get into whatever it is that I'm getting into. In this case, devotional life.
Yeah.
Or I have to have the perfect set of circumstances. Once I get the job, then I can continue and start my spiritual life, or then I can focus on this type of thing. And it's a good idea for us to look at when we're being smart by our waiting game, or when we're holding back out of fear or trying to control our surrender.
Yeah.
Right? Surrender is surrender because we are not supposed to be controlling it. Right? We're supposed to be giving over that control to our higher power, greatest good, God, if that doesn't give you hives to say.
Yeah.
Right? So like, we're supposed to be giving over some of that control, but instead we do the thing. We're like, oh yeah, I'm going to surrender, but like next week when it's more opportune. And so then we start to see this. Now we get an idea of seeing this authentic balance. It's like, how can I really balance that? It's like, well, what if we're never going to feel ready?
Yeah.
What if that surrender is like, sometimes, surrender is opening your arms up and saying, okay, God, take the wheel, do your thing. And then sometimes surrender is acting with faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really have to take a hard look at ourselves and find out when our procrastination or our inaction is coming from a place of fear and laziness, which in the case of Arjuna, like, this is why he's saying, give up this laziness, give up this lethargy, give up this procrastination. Arjuna's procrastinating on something that he knows. He's like, well, I know this has to happen. We've tried every other way to avoid a war, but now it has to occur. And this is like, it's bigger than me. It's way deep in my soul. This warrior activity is what I do.
Yeah.
But maybe there might be a better time. Maybe there might be a better way. And Krishna's like, dude, we've explored every option. Now you're hanging back, and it's from a place of complete fear and laziness. He's like, now now you got to surrender.
Right.
And in this case, surrender doesn't mean inaction. Surrender actually means action, but pairing that action with a deep faith.
Mm-hmm. So then, and again, it's possibly what I would add to this, because I love this, is why one of the things within Krishna consciousness, within Bhakti Yoga, is often said to be one of the most important things on your spiritual path, is seeking out good association, or seeking out those who are already treading the path, especially those who are already treading the path, who are, well, both those who are your peers, but also those who are further down the path, those who are already living this life that you want to live. Because sometimes it's tough, it's confusing. Like here with Arjuna, he's confused. Now, if Arjuna's confused, what chance do we stand at thinking we're going to know it all? And I see it in my own life, and I often think, God, how can I overcome this confusion, or whatever it might be? And again, we take Arjuna's example. So he's placing himself before Krishna and asking the right questions. And we can do that. We can pick up these books. I mean, this is how I understand it, how we can connect with this good association. That's another very in-house term, almost like unalloyed good association. That means hanging out with like-minded, spiritually like-minded people who are trying to do the same thing as you. Get yourself in their company so you can talk about these things. You can bounce your confusions off each other. And if you can, find a teacher who you can bounce those confusions off of, someone who can guide you. And the books also act as teachers.
Yeah.
I find that I often, they're like mystical experiences sometimes when you're really struggling with something and you take shelter, you surrender with even just with the books where all of this spiritual knowledge is laid out for us. Sometimes the most wonderful realizations can take place. Things can open up in your mind, in your heart. You can gain a lot of clarity. And yeah, it's a really powerful way to navigate those confusing times.
Yeah. And, it's like if you were like seeking sanctuary, right?
Yeah,
Or asylum, you don't go into it saying, okay, I need a place. I desperately need a place, but I'm going to need you to have this, 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 and this. When you go seeking sanctuary, you're ready. You're like, I'll take it, whatever it is. I need shelter. I need this place.
right.
So when we really come to those places in our lives, seeking shelter and sanctuary, even within the terms of these books, right, as they act as teachers, it's so difficult for us because we go into it. It's like, I need sanctuary. Also, I need it to look like this, 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 and this. And sometimes the answers, yeah, the answers that come back, it's like, that's not exactly how this works. And so then we have to really take a hard look at our lives and our hearts and say, okay, I'm really in a moment where I really, really, really need this. And I really need this certain teaching or this certain lesson. And when that lesson comes in, it's totally okay. It's okay to take it from a place where even you might not have thought it would come from. So say, and I get a lot of messages about people and they're saying, I've had a lot of trauma in my life and I don't really trust the opposite gender.
Mm-hmm.
How can I go into a spiritual community where it seems like the opposite gender, it's all the ecclesiastical heads?
Right.
Right? If I don't trust men and all the heads are men, how can I go into a spiritual organization and trust this? And my question is always, well, do you not accept anything that has ever been said by a male figure? I'm not saying you have to give them your whole existence and be their best friend and do everything they say. But if they have a message that calls to your soul, you can take what resonates
Mm,
and then put the rest down.
right.
Like, you don't have to, it's like, I take what resonates and I take all of this with this person. No. And that's, Krishna is constantly saying to Arjuna, he's like, look, I'm going to explain this, but do you have extra doubts? I'm going to explain this, but now is everything, you good now? Because if not, ask me another question. Find out again. Does this resonate with you? And if it doesn't, then we'll figure that out after. But let me know, is it resonating? So I think it's so important that even Krishna is asking. God is not saying, oh, just blindly follow, give me everything. Eventually he does say, he's like, just give me everything and don't worry about it.
Right.
But after he's really primed you, like after he's really been like, no, but I'm here for you. I
Mm,
really care. I'm going to ask the questions that actually show that I care. I'm going
mm,
to interact with you in a way that shows that I care. And this is about, this is what you said about good association. Here we have the association of a supreme divine person who then says, but I'm going to put in the work to show you that I care. Go figure. God has to put in some work for us. But he's saying, he's like, it's not a one way. I'm telling you, you're going to have to put in some work to surrender, but I'm also going to put in the work to show you that when you surrender, I'm not just going to leave you high and dry. So then you feel safer. You feel safe enough to come and associate with me. And once you associate with me, then it's like, I got your back. Ask me the questions, find out the things. And so, yes, good association is absolutely key. It's pivotal to our faith.
yeah.
And just at the beginning of the 9th chapter, which we're going to get to, it's like those first 3 verses, 1, 2, 3, 4 verses. Srila Prabhupada talks about how good association is the most important factor for faith in our spiritual lives.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. I'm looking in the purport to this verse now, and I've skipped to the second, just to the first sentence of the second paragraph, and it feels to me as though this might be something worth discussing. To enter Krishna's supreme abode, or the innumerable Vaikuntha planets, is possible only by bhakti, devotional service, as clearly indicated here by the word bhaktya. No other process can help one attain that supreme abode.
So funny, when I was reading over this, I also read over that very same sentence.
Yeah.
And it is so worth discussing because there are so many forms of yoga, right? It's like you can stand on your head, you can breathe deeply and then hold your breath for a really long time. You get all these things. And here Krishna's like, to enter into the absolute kingdom of God, that kingdom of God from which no one returns, right? That kingdom, that place that everybody wants to go. It's like, you don't actually need to stand on your head for very long. You don't actually need to go through all the things. What we want is consistent love, as unconditionally as we can get it.
And to me, this is where, because I feel as though we've spoken a lot about how the oneness of spirituality, like in the last episode, we spoke a lot about that. Yeah. And to me, this really, because that can also be, you can misunderstand that as well when you talk about oneness. Often people think oneness and they see that as being everything is the same. We're all the same. Everything is the same. There's no difference in whatever you choose to do. It's all one, which is not quite what, when we're talking about this unity, it's not quite what that means. But what it is saying is that that oneness is love. That's the oneness. Wherever there's love, that's where you're going to get the same outcome. And that's really the essence, because there are so many ways to approach divinity or the God or whatever it is you're trying to do. There's so many ways to approach it with so many moods and so many practices. And they're not all exactly the same. They're different. That's just what they are. That's just a fact, right? So, and this is where that, whatever practice you're doing, if you're aiming for a relationship with the divine in awe and reverence, as an example, which is considered one of the ways that you can approach God, then that's what you'll achieve. If that's your goal, if that's how you're coming to that relationship, what you're bringing to the table. And there's different ways that you can bring yourself to the table. Mm-hmm. What's saying here is that if you want to achieve the ultimate goal of life, the pinnacle of spiritual success, for want of a better word, what we're trying to bring to the table is our love, unalloyed love for God. That's what's going to take you to time. Whichever way you practice that, that's fine. There's many ways you can practice that. There's many faiths within which you can practice that, but the essence is love.
Yeah. And so it's like, I feel like I hear devil's advocate questioners in my mind.
Oh, right? I love it. Do
it. Even from the Bhakti tradition, saying things like, so you mean to tell me that Christians practicing like a love of God, they're going to enter the same kingdom of God? It's like, yes, eventually. Absolutely. It's exactly what God is saying. Yeah. And it's like, but you mean to tell me that tribal, like indigenous people from a corner of the world that don't know anything about bhakti, they don't even know the word, don't know anything about the gods that I've seen, and you mean to tell me that if they're approaching whatever they consider to be the spiritual pinnacle, if they're approaching that with love, they get to the yes. Yeah. they reach spiritual perfection. We do not have a lock on God. We don't have a lock on spirituality.
Yeah.
And it's like being in high school. High school, you get places, and essentially they all teach you the same thing, right? They teach you all the things that you need to know to get to college or to get to the university. Um, but everybody's high school is going to be a little different. And I went to a performing arts high school, and I remember having that like aha moment where, because I was in a performing arts high school, we did things a certain way, and I never even stopped to think about how other people were going about their high school lives, until one day I asked one of my friends, and I was like, I just realized that I have like voice and speech classes and movement for actors classes. And I was like, what do you do? And they were like, oh yeah, I have a double period of math. And I was like, oh wow, I'd die. Huh. I would just I would just wither away and die if I had that. It's amazing. And I still had math, still had science, still had English, but framed in a certain way that was really, really good for me. So
Yeah.
that's what I feel like these spiritual paths are like.
Yeah.
Everything is going to teach you the things that you need to know to find love of God. Who's God? What's our relationship with supreme divinity? How to love that supreme divinity. All going to the same place. But now you get to figure out a spiritual, a school course that vibes well with you. Some
Yeah.
people would love a double period of math. Some people like me, that doesn't work for them. And so I feel like this is what spirituality is. It's finding that path that really, really works well for you.
Absolutely. There's we're it's like, imagine trying to say that we all had to fit into the same square hole. It's just, we're not like that. And so why are we putting the same thing on God? That it's one square pegged hole. There's no way around it. There's no space for anything else. And hearing you again give the examples earlier, you're trying to tell me that a Christian, you're trying to tell me that a tribal person. In my mind, I was thinking straight away, imagine that, I say this as a Hare Krishna, right? Imagine a Christian who with all their heart, with their mind and heart, offered themselves to, let's just use the word God, because there are different names for God, but it just said that they offer themselves to God with loving devotion, and they dedicated their life to doing that. Do you think God, because that person used a different name to the name I use, that sincerity would be rejected? Or a tribal person, that sincerity within their heart, if they came to the table, and I say that the table of divinity with love in their heart, that would be useless, or in some cases, according to certain beliefs, that would actually end them in hell.
Yeah, right? Like, not only, it's like, and we do actually do this. I was a college counselor for a while. So I saw this a lot for like 4 or 5 years. And I saw this a lot. People would have a full degree. They would be a complete doctor in their country. They come to America. They want to transfer the same degree. Does not work. Does not exist. And we do this with each other with religion, right? Somebody's been studying and giving themselves, right? Having this relationship with divinity. Then they come into a new practice or a new spiritual organization, and we all of a sudden tell them, not only does all your progress over there not exist, but you're probably going to be punished for forever for it. And I was like, whoa, I was actually just authentically and sincerely practicing. It's like, how do
That's
we how do
such a
we
great analogy.
yeah,
I love that
how do
analogy.
we get the gall, or how do we have the audacity to tell somebody that their previous degree no longer exists?
Yeah, a great analogy, Acyuta. Fantastic. There's one question just came in. Someone was talking about the word God in the comments. Perhaps we can address it just for a second. It was nearby K Nandan. How is devotion useful for those who have for those who has no meaning for God. I know I can't believe in anything like God for sure. I do admire the beauty and detailing of everything that the Hare Krishnas do, but when it comes to God, it puts me off. That's totally fair enough, and I imagine it's with good reason that word puts you off. It possibly, I mean, people have experiences in this world that, for example, if I had been raised in a world where everything that around me, when I say good reason, this is what I'm saying. If I'd been raised in a world where everything around me associated with God was associated with fear and oppression, which we do see sometimes, then I might feel the same.
I'm only raising my eyebrows because I am about to say something that might ruffle nearby's feathers. But and I want you to know that I say this as a Black woman raised in a spiritual organization and community that was actually loaded with oppression against me. Raised in a place where the foundational teaching is you're not this body, and still within a structure with stuff loaded and put on there that was used to oppress me. In a current body of a Black woman, like who knows what it'll be in the past or in the future, whatever. Right. So, but I thought it was really interesting first that this comment comes from, and his name's Nearby, and it's like without fear. Without fear. Now, what I want to say is all this stuff, and yes, there is good reason, but we have to put those reasons in their proper place. Is it God or is it people?
Yes.
Did God specifically come to you, dream, vision, otherwise, and say, you know what, Nearby, I hate you, and everything that you're doing is not going to matter, and I'm putting shackles on everything that you're doing, and all the good things that you've done are completely wiped out because you fell off the path one day, and now I'm punishing you and sending you to hell forever. It's people.
Exactly.
It's usually not God that we're mad at. It's the people. And so I've been working my whole life on trying to separate the people, institutions, communities, organizations from my best friend. Because my best friend didn't do that.
You put things so freaking well sometimes. I have more excitement. I could show more physical excitement right now. I'm just controlling myself for the sake of the podcast.
Like, you ever hear something so good you want to punch somebody in the face about it?
I wanted to get up and do a jig and like hit the wall. Just because I got good positive energy coming from what you're saying. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I've spent like the past week putting out reels about this exact thing. What do you do when you're done and you're fed up with the spiritual organization? How do we find a balance so that we can be fed up with that but not give up on our best friend? Because our best friend didn't give up. Still here. Still sneaking in, still finding ways to bring you to this point where you keep hearing this word that ruffles your feathers and gets under your skin. It's like God, 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 and God's gotten under your skin. What do we do when we don't necessarily like the spiritual organizations? But the best friend didn't do anything. That's like, Madhva, I've decided I had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours and it didn't go so well, so now I'm not talking to you anymore. You'd be like, but we didn't speak. How can their thoughts and their ideas and what the argument you had with them influence our relationship of years, for years? I'm like, yeah, nah, that's that's the way the cookie crumbles. We can never speak again. And in fact, I'm going to hold a grudge against you. I'd be heartbroken. So I want to try and separate the two, because my relationship with my friend, and this is what Krishna is telling us, your relationship with Krishna is different. It's outside the realms of all of that, which is why Krishna says, biggest teaching, he's like, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I got you. He's like, because I'm your best friend. And I didn't do that. All the systems and the rules and the things and all whatever. I'm telling you right now. He's like, I'm telling you in 18 chapters, I didn't do it. What I did do was stand here right by you, side by side, right next to your soul, same body, whatever body you took.
Beautiful. That addresses that, in my humble opinion. But yeah, that was a really beautiful response. I don't know if Nearby is still with us, but perhaps that resonated, perhaps it didn't. I hope it did. I hope it did. Wonderful. All right. So you were saying we could look at grouping these last section of verses because they're building up to the same point, to one final conclusion, right?
Yeah.
So shall we? Do you want to start? Just take it at whatever pace you like.
Sure. So starting from 23. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. Those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery god, in the light, at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon planet, but again comes back. According to Vedic opinion, there are 2 ways of passing from this world, one in the light and one in darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back. But when one passes in darkness, he returns. Although the devotees know these 2 paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. And then we'll save the very last one for a nice wrap up. But I like especially, he says, although the devotees know these 2 paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. And I like that because just reading the translations, I was definitely bewildered.
That was my first thought.
Yeah, I was like, I'm confused. If you have no knowledge of Vedic astrology and when the sun moves into the north and what that's called with this Uttarayana and then the other one, and then when it's ascendant or non-ascendant and the waxing and the waning moon and all this stuff, it's like, how does one control that? Death seems uncontrollable. How does one get to a point where they control that? And then Krishna says, but the devotees who know this, right? Devotees know. What does devotees mean? This is what Krishna was speaking about at the first part. Those who are devoted. Those who have given their lives to devotion. They might know it, but they're not bewildered. And why? Because they don't have to focus on it. They don't have to focus on it. It's like, what's our core principle? That core principle is love. And then letting God handle the details.
Yes.
And so I think, it's important to note why. Why are they not bewildered? Because I know it's already above my head. One of my friends, Doyle Garunga, he
Wonderful
really
guy.
aptly put it. Huh?
Wonderful person.
Yeah. He was saying, dear God, help me to recognize when something is above my pay grade and when I have to let you take charge. And that totally, I was like, yes, that's exactly what it is. Like, we are dealing with things that are way above our pay grade and way above our level of understanding. And that's okay. It's like working with all the planets shifting and the movements of the universe. Like, what if I don't understand all that? It's the same thing here. It's like, what if somebody doesn't even know the name for my process of devotion? Krishna's like, cool, doesn't matter. He's like, I know how to switch between those. It's like, I know how to separate all the things in the path from the intention. And so that's what we're getting into. We have yogis who will follow the path, but sometimes you're on your own. Once you start trying to control things yourself, you're kind of on your own. Whereas surrender leads you to this place, and we've looked at this analogy before. Mother cat comes, picks up the cat, carries it. right? Whereas you have a mama monkey, and the baby monkey's got to hold on, right? You got to hold on for dear life. You got to do the work. And so this is us kind of controlling our surrender. But then that puts us in a place where we're on our own. And we don't want to be on our own because that's above my pay grade. Nope, I need assistance.
All of a
Whereas
sudden you're in the
now,
world of waxing and waning moons and up and down and left and right and sun and smoke,
yeah,
and I'm lost already.
that's right. Yeah, and you get this whole idea, the yogi should raise the fire from, from the heart and all the way up. And we spoke about this before. I was like, I don't know how to do that. I have not figured that out. I don't. I don't. Honestly saying, I have no idea. And then you have to like block the holes with the heel of the foot and like do all this stuff. And I'm like, I am not so advanced as
Yeah.
to think that I can do all that. But now Krishna's saying, but you don't have to be. You don't have to be. Your level of advancement is determined by Krishna's standards, according to what goes on here. It's according to our intention, our devotion.
Yes. And this is one of the beautiful things about Krishna consciousness, really beautiful things for me, perhaps because I consider myself a simple person. And I appreciate the simplicity. And it just really resonates with me, with my heart. And I do believe that this is just an essential truth of life in general. We complicate things. Life is simpler than we think. But also of spirituality in general. I tend to see this as a common theme whenever you dive into different understandings of God, that this does seem to be a common theme, that actually it's not so difficult. And so when we complicate things, perhaps that's a sign that we're a little off track. We're missing the point a little bit. Perhaps our intentions need a little realignment, because what we're hearing here is that, what I'm hearing here is that if things are complicated, if I'm complicating things, if I'm having to do all of this crazy stuff, for example, all of the things that have just been said in these verses here, my intentions are probably selfish. And where is that going to lead me? And versus having devotional intentions, and therefore knowing that he got this. I'm being looked after. I don't have to worry. I don't have to complicate anything. I can just live with faith that the complicated stuff is taken care of. I just focus on my own loving devotion.
Yeah. Now, once again, I hear I feel like I hear the questioners in my mind going, so then why do we
Perfect.
have,
Yes.
like, why would we have rules and regulations at all then? If it all deals with our intentions and all this stuff, why have rules and regulations if it all doesn't really matter? And to that, I would say,
I'm glad you're going to
those
answer
rules
that.
yeah, right? Like,
yeah, good question. Why?
yeah. And those rules and regulations help us to get more sincere about what's important for us. They're helping us to get more aligned. And like you said, sometimes my intentions need a realignment. And so sometimes we can see how aligned we are by how we're acting. Am I doing things? Am I ingesting things? Like, what we ingest, what we put into our body doesn't just mean food. It also means what we're reading, what we're watching, what we're listening to, right? And when all of those things, when we're ingesting those things that are making us bitter or anxiety ridden or fearful or just envious, angry, greedy, we need some realignment. And so all of these rules and regulations are supposed to be helping us get realigned. What I also like is that Krishna, essentially, in all of these things, he's saying, now I've told you all the rules and regulations. And I can only imagine sometimes like Arjuna's eyes like glazing over and him like, what? Like, dude, I'm a warrior. We fight. I do penance to get what I want. But really, I'm a warrior. Like, I'm a gym rat. I work out a lot, like, and Arjuna is of course incredibly intelligent, but he's like, bro, I'm gonna need you to work with me here. Like, I don't even know what you're telling me. And so I feel like, Krishna's like, yes, but the point is, right? Get yourself in alignment. Make sure that alignment is there. And once that alignment is there and you've got your intentions really aligned, don't become a slave to all the rules and regulations so stringently that you forget what the purpose was and what the goal was.
Mm,
So sometimes I feel like when we get aligned with a cause or
mm,
an organization, or we become activists, you start thinking about, oh, this is the cause, and you forget why you were doing it in the first place. And that can lead us to become the very things that we were acting out against. So if you are a vegan and you started because of compassion, and it's just leading you to badmouth all the people that you know, what happened to the compassion that we were starting with? Like, like it doesn't. It's got to transfer. We have to remember those first intentions. And when we get, similarly into spiritual organizations, if we got there yearning for connection and yearning for love and acceptance and community and compassion, but once we get there, we start telling everybody how much everybody else is going to hell. What happened to the connection and the love and the acceptance and the compassion that we were searching for?
mm.
So I feel like Krishna's like, yeah, there's going to be rules and regulations. Don't forget your intentions. Don't forget where that focus was coming from in the first place.
Right. Beautiful point. Beautiful point. Like to reflect it just to make sure I got it because I really liked it. That the rules and regulations are there because they're alignment tools. Finding doing what we want to do doesn't just happen. There's like you gave the example of diet. If we are constantly putting crappy food into ourselves, it's going to leave us feeling lethargic. It's going to lower our mood. It's going to make it very difficult to be a happy, energetic, go-lucky person. So you might have to do certain things with your diet to realign what's happening in your body to help you find that energetic, mental, emotional space that you're looking to achieve. And that's what the
Mm-hmm.
rules and regulations are for. They're there to realign us, to help slot us into that space where we're able to enter into devotion, to make it conducive for that. You were also saying that to be aware that we can sometimes, on the basis of rules and regulations, forget the purpose of them. And we can become fanatical about rules and regulations. And then so that's something to be cautious of, is fanaticism, where then we start using the practice to do the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. You're talking about angry vegans, for example. And I say that as someone who really appreciates veganism, lifelong vegetarian, and I love veganism, even though I'm not a vegan. But it's you've missed the point when you're going in that direction. Or if you're a religious person who just spends most of your time bashing other people for not being religious like you, again, where was that compassion, that love? We've lent on the rules and regulations or whatever it might be and gone fanatical and forgot the purpose. So having that refocusing, sometimes making sure that we're still remembering our original intentions, is important as well.
Yeah. And Arjuna is doing this all through Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to do this. He's like, you are lamenting for that which is not worthy of grief. He's like, realign. What did you read? What was the original intent of this whole situation? Right. So now, we bring in, like, Arjuna's like, but I'm being compassionate. He's like, too compassionate to a fault. You are forgetting the original purpose of your compassion. And I think that that's important because not everything spiritual will be good for us. And that, I think, is a really, really important point that we have to remember.
Ooh,
Not
that one
everything
hit different.
spiritual is good for us. Yeah, we can't just take, oh, but this is spiritual and this is spiritual and this is spiritual and this is spiritual, and you put it all in. I feel like drink from too many wells, and that's how you get dysentery. It's like saying, like, we talked about diet, right? So if somebody said, a good Ayurvedic diet, coconut oil is really good for you. And then everybody's on a coconut oil craze. And this happens, right? Like quinoa or avocado or whatever the latest like phase is. But it's like, oh, but this is good for you. And so that's what you want to ingest most of. And so you might think, yeah, that's good for you. But what if you're allergic to coconut?
Mm.
And you're like, yeah, that's good for them. Sure, that might work, but I'm allergic to coconut. What if that doesn't work for me? And they're like, but this was spiritual. This is good for everybody. So I don't know. Like, what do you mean? You're just left out in the cold? So when we get on spiritual paths and within spiritual organizations, we have to constantly be looking at ourselves and looking at what resonates with us really truly. And if something is not resonating with you, don't be afraid to reassess. Don't be afraid to say, I got to put that down for now. I can accept this. I can take that. But that I'm gonna have to circle back and come back around when I've got a better understanding of myself and this process. Because not everything spiritual is good for us, nor is it everything spiritual is even meant for us. And so, we like to think everything in life should be a one-stop shop, right? I did the work, did the healing, done, moved on. And that's not how anything in life works, but especially not spirituality. It's a lifelong practice, something that we're constantly having to ask ourselves again and again and reassess. Is this right for me? Is this really resonating with me? Am I feeling something from this?
Permit me to tell a quick story
Yes.
to see if I've understood your point, because I may have misunderstood you. But this, to me, is bringing this idea of, you're saying this idea that perhaps not everything spiritual is right for you. So what makes me think of, for example, is the story of a saint or a sage. There was a sage who made a vow of truthfulness.
Mm.
And he was so committed to his vow of truthfulness. Now, what happened? People in the village knew that. You could ask him anything, he was never going to lie. Now, one day, some very distressed people ran to his small hut, and they were saying, hide us, the dacoits are chasing us. We're being chased by people who want to kill us. Can we hide here? Can we hide here? Please protect us. And he permitted them. They hid in a small section of his hut. And obviously not long after, these dacoits were pursuing them. They came across this hut, and they came and they saw the sage, and they said, have you seen these people? We're chasing them. Have you seen them? And with his commitment to truth, he said, yes, they're there. And the result was the dacoits found and killed these people. Now, truth is a spiritual principle. But in that case, in that specific case, based on that scenario with those people and what was happening in the moment, it was the wrong thing to do. And it highlights that dharma or duty or truth is sometimes complicated, and it's not always the same in every circumstance. Is that what is that a good representation of what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly the point. And
Yeah.
because Bhagavad Gita doesn't happen just in a vacuum, right? We've got a whole backstory. To that point, Krishna goes to Karna, who is almost like arch nemesis of Arjuna. Think, sun and moon, which they often do kind of represent and equate themselves with. Um, and Krishna says to Karna, he says, look, ultimately you could join my team. I'd take care of everything for you. You'd win, I'd give you riches, I'd give you whatever you want. Just join my team. And Karna says, well, I took a vow, and my dharma is to be truthful to my friend. his friend also happened to be the villain of the entire story. So he's like, I got to stay with my best friend. And Krishna's like, but I'll handle that too. You won't even incur no sin, no problems. Giving him essentially the same bargain he's given Arjuna throughout this whole Bhagavad Gita. If you just come with me, I'll take care of everything. Again and again, Karna says, nope, sorry, I can't do it. I have to stay true to my dharma.
Mm.
In the end, Karna did not get all of the wonderful things. He dies in battle, does all this stuff, like, and you're kind of on your own. But one, I love that Krishna tried. I love that Krishna tried. Even somebody you think would be an enemy, Krishna's like, look, just one time, join my team. I'll take care of you. And Karna saying, but I've gotta follow my truth. He's like, but is that really your truth? Is it really making you happy? Do you even really know who you are? You don't know your backstory. You don't know, because Karna didn't know his parents. He's like, you're an adoptee, all this stuff. You don't even really know your truth. He's like, I'm telling you, if you just came over on this side, he's like, nah, I got to stick with it. And so he becomes one of the most controversial figures within the Mahabharata. How often are we like that? And somebody, I had a conversation, even on it was a live stream. And I had a conversation with a friend, and they were asking me who my favorite characters in Mahabharata were. And I was saying I really liked Karna. I mean, he's got this tragic hero kind of trajectory. And they were saying, yeah, I think they were like, Karna did some stupid things. And what I said was, I was like, my problem with Karna is the same problem I have with myself. How many times is my best friend coming and saying, look, if you join my team, I got you. And I'm like, yeah, but I've got so many other important things to do. And he's like, more important than me? Like ruler of the universe, maker of the sun go round? And I'm like, yeah, more important than you, bro. I got too many things. I've got responsibilities. I got to handle business. He's like, I am the maker, the end all be all of business, Like if I'd handle your business for you. I'm like, yeah, but. So, my problem with Karna is the same problem I have with myself. And it doesn't even make sense, all the reasons that I give. So when we're looking at our spiritual dharmas and things that we have tied our identities to, are we tying them to God, the person? Or are we tying them to somebody else's idea and concept of God?
Very, very powerful point. Very, very powerful point. Yeah, I love the bringing it home, looking at yourself. My problem with Karna is the problem I have with myself. Because that's what we're trying to do here. That's what so many of these histories are illustrating, ways that we can continue to look at ourselves. So that's really powerful in that sense. I really appreciate that angle of that way of looking at Karna's role in that story.
Mm-hmm.
Very powerful. I'm just looking at the second to last verse of this chapter real quick, just scanning through to see if there's anything before because otherwise there's a concluding verse.
I know. Yeah, the purport to that verse is actually really beautiful. Krishna is here advising Arjuna that he should not be disturbed by the different paths the soul can take when leaving the material world. And I would venture to put that, like, bring it out. We shouldn't be disturbed by the different paths that a soul can take in going on a spiritual journey either. A devotee of the Supreme Lord should not worry whether he will depart by arrangement or by accident. The devotee should be firmly established in Krishna consciousness and chant Hare Krishna. He should know that concern over either of these two paths is troublesome. The best way to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness is to be always dovetailed in his service, and this will make one's path to the spiritual kingdom safe, certain, and direct.
There we go. What more is there to say?
Yeah. I find it interesting that Srila Prabhupada goes on to bring up Rupa Goswami. And one of the most amazing, we have Nectar of Devotion, right? Long Sanskrit word, it's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But we have a Nectar of Devotion, beautiful, like, dissertation on bhakti and loving devotion. And the author of this long, extensive thesis on devotion has boiled it down to like 2-factor teachings that kind of go hand in hand. Accepting what is favorable for devotional service, and rejecting or letting go and releasing that which is unfavorable. Now, to have the wherewithal as an author to take all of this big, tome of material and boil it down just to this one-liner: accept what is favorable and reject what is unfavorable, is so key. And we constantly have to ask ourselves this question personally, even within a spiritual path: is this actually favorable or conducive to me continuing on having my relationship with my supreme best friend? Is this not conducive to me having my relationship with my supreme best friend? So we can say, it's like, well, I have a relationship with my supreme best friend, but it doesn't look like yours. And that's fine. It shouldn't. That's the thing here, is that it's not going to look like anybody else's. And that's why he's saying, don't be so worried about when they leave or how they leave and all the things that they've done to leave. Your path might not look like that. And that's okay, because it's individual, it's unique. And each of us have an individual and unique relationship with the divine. But we can look at it and say, is there something about their path that resonates with mine, that is conducive, favorable toward me continuing this relationship? Is there something about that path that is unfavorable? And sometimes we have to be able to release. We have to know when to bend, when to hold on, and then when to let go and say, yeah, that part's not for me, but this part is, and that's cool. I jive with this, and that's okay. Which is why I always, I kind of admire people who are able to say, they're like, I'm really, really into Kirtan or into the singing practice of bhakti, and I don't know about the rest yet. I'm like, that's so honest. I love it. It's so honest that I love it to have the wherewithal to say, when I'm singing, this music does something for me that I'm able to really dive into. And I don't know about the rest yet. I'm still trying it out. And I'm like, perfect. Then just keep doing what works.
Fully.
And have faith, like we have faith that our friend they're going to handle the rest.
Fully. Yeah, we can't be fake anyway. There's no faking it. So why not be honest? It's probably easier for someone who's come into something fresh to have that level of honesty. I actually find it's harder for people who have been raised within an institution to be able to find those same levels of honesty, because we got so many institutional hookups and stigmas and whatever it might be. But this is why I love what you've been saying from the beginning of today, especially when you were answering or responding to that comment, which is, be smart enough not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Be smart enough to see the gold in the dirt. And if you're able to do that, if you're able to separate, for example, people from truth and what certain people do and say and behave, and from truth, and you're able to, then it's a very, very powerful thing, and it's quite a mature approach. And yeah, this honesty it's really challenging. It's really challenging sometimes. But I feel like the more we're able to step into greater levels of honesty with ourselves about where we're actually at, how we actually feel. So someone might say that I'm struggling with this, and although that looks socially bad, that's where I'm at. You're going to be better off on your path than someone who's constantly saying, oh, you're trying to give off a facade of success or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's a very
And
powerful
I
thing.
feel it, so well said, Madhva. And I feel like that leads beautifully into like this last verse. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. It's exactly what we were saying at the beginning. It's like, wait a second. You mean to tell me that somebody who doesn't know the names, doesn't know all the stuff, doesn't know all the prayers, doesn't know the Sanskrit fluently, can't like rattle off things in multiple languages, you mean to tell me they get all the same results? Yes. Just by doing what they do authentically, with intention and a full heart? Yeah. It's like, wait, but that's not fair. And it's like, well, how is it not fair? Because if they got that, then how do I win? It's like, it's not about us winning. This is not a competition that we win at. This is a relationship that we are having. This is a cosmic dance that we're going through. It's no more about win or lose, which is what we get a lot of. It's like, ha, you lose, you're going to hell for forever. And I win, and I'm going to the happy place. This is not what this is about. This is about souls in eternal relationships and the different ways that that looks.
Yeah. I love this. I love this point. I'm looking at here as well. Have you read the I feel like this last verse is almost confusing now reading the first paragraph of the purport.
Yeah. One has to study the Vedas under the guidance of the spiritual master and undergo many austerities and penances while living under his care. A brahmachari has to live in the home of the spiritual master just like a servant, and he must beg alms from door to door and bring them to the spiritual master. He takes food only under the master's order, and if the master neglects to call the student for food that day, the student fasts. These are some of the Vedic principles for observing brahmacharya. So what I like is that Srila Prabhupada is like, do you want to know what Krishna is talking about when he's saying get all the benefits? He's like this right here. And what we're leading up to is this ultimate culmination that, and Srila Prabhupada says, the beauty of Krishna consciousness, however, is that by one stroke, by engaging in devotional service, one can surpass all the rituals of the different orders of life.
This is why you have to read all the way through. And this is why you this is a perfect example of taking things out of context. Because I read that first paragraph and I was thinking, I'm confused all of a sudden again. And then I looked down and I was like, okay, I'm not confused anymore.
Yeah.
And read the whole way, friends, because otherwise you could get confused like I just did.
Oh my gosh. And I have in my spiritual life, I have taken to saying to myself, I'm like, okay, let God finish. Let him finish. Let God finish. Give him a second. Let him hear him out.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Just pause him. Wait. He's not finished. He's not finished yet. Wait.
Because there's so many times when I find myself in situations, I'm like, I prayed for something and now this comes and look at this. I'm in more trouble than I was before. And I'm like, Acyuta, hold on a minute before we go crazy. Let's let him finish. Let's see what's going to happen. The sentence must not be finished yet. He's still talking.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that comparison. I love that comparison. It's, I mean, it's so true that, you know, this is actually probably true. And I really feel as though, again, we have to be intelligent about when we hear or read certain spiritual things that might trigger us,
Mm-hmm.
because we can take things out of context often. And this is true. I feel like this is for example, particularly true about Islam, for example, is that there's so many things that are often taken out of context, and there's so much fear that, at least at one point in time, probably still, there was a lot of fear generated around Islam based off of misconceptions, based off of misunderstandings, and taking things out of context. And the same thing happens within other spiritual beliefs and systems. And it really takes an intelligent person to say, oh, it says that there, that sounds strange, and not just discard and judge something to be rubbish, foolish, whatever, but to say, let me just see, is that what was actually meant there? Let me go and do my own research. Let me speak to people about that. Is that what was really meant? Wasn't really, because sometimes especially with spiritual wisdom, it requires that deeper dive. It really does require that. And like you said earlier, you were raised in a world where you had to make that deeper dive, because there was so much crap on the surface that if you didn't dive deeper and say, wait a second, is this the truth? Or is there a deeper truth? You'd have just said, screw this, I'm out.
Yeah. You know, and take for instance, it's like women are less intelligent, right? You'll see this a lot, especially in these bhakti books. You'll see it a lot. It'll float around. This women are less intelligent. You could hear that and be like, well, that's it. I'm turned off, leaving forever. So much so that the ecclesiastical heads have even thought, maybe we should take that out of the books. Maybe we should change it in the books and all this stuff. And my thing is, I'm like, well, I think as a woman, I kind of have the clout to say, are are we still reading, or did we stop there, take it out of context? And yes, the reason things are triggering to us is because they've been used as oppressive tools.
Yeah.
The trigger is very real. The oppressive feeling is very real. You will get people who will want to oppress you, but is this really what the author meant? Right? Is this what the commentator actually meant? Or do we continue to read where Srila Prabhupada says, but everybody is less intelligent and fallen. And the one way to rise above that is to transcend all of these designations that make me think I am hardcore and American and this and that, because that's all going to change. That's all going to change. I'm going to get older. I'm going to die. The country is going to change. I'm not even going to agree with the country, right? But the same way that my country's government will do things that I don't agree with, but I don't up and leave the country and give up my citizenship, we find a way to navigate, right? And still have to live in that structure. The same token, sometimes we have to look at our spiritual organizations like that and think, okay, am I just going to give up my citizenship and move? Or are these same problems going to be everywhere? And I have to find a way to extract the spiritual essence and understand that, okay, I can't let that trigger me because somebody else is going to use it to oppress me. There's always going to be something that somebody wants to use to oppress somebody else. Can we once again look at it and try, like you said, separate the baby from the bathwater? And in doing that, what I really heard, I heard earlier in this week, because I was also using that analogy, somebody was saying, once we understand the truth about the baby and the bathwater, maybe we don't need to throw out either. Maybe it's not a case of throw everything out, but like you understand where each has its own function.
Yes, right, exactly. Wise words. Very, very wise words. And I want to pick up on, you said this, and again, this to me is wisdom, is that understanding that in one sense, and you can go from the frying pan into the fire. When we're looking at the externals and we're trying to escape what's happening around us, we're constantly attributing it to external problems outside of us, and we're saying the institution is this, or the country is like that, let me give up my citizenship and move here, or let me leave this spiritual institution and go there. We're not realizing that the problem is not the externals. Those things are happening everywhere. That's the nature of this world. The real problem I have is what's happening in here. That's what I have to look at. And that's where I have to dig deep and ask the questions. And when you do that, what you realize is it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in the frying pan or in the fire. You could be in hellfire, literally in hellfire. And if you're taking the approach of actually going deep within and looking at and making your anchor, making your shelter that real truth, that other stuff doesn't affect you. I mean, there are prayers from Vaishnava Bhakti saints saying, I will go to hell so long as I'll do that over forgetting my relationship with you. I'd rather be there and maintain that loving, deep connection that I have with you in my heart than go to heaven and forget that.
It's beautiful. And, you know, like we've said, the triggers are real, but if we can remember what the goal is, then we won't get so tripped up.
Yeah.
And that's
triggers are
the
real
aim.
though.
Yeah, that's the aim, is to not get more entangled. The aim is to get less entangled. So, you know, taking, for instance, this women are less intelligent, you can look at it and use it as a way to get tripped up and say, oh, this whole thing is run by men and all they see is this, this, and this. Or, and I've done this, I can really look at it and say, okay, what's the truth of that statement? And what is not truth about that statement? What is true about that statement is we're all less intelligent than somebody. So there are going to be rocket scientists, and I would consider myself less intelligent than them, sure, in a different regard, because my intelligence works differently. I'm much more of a creative person, much more of an intuitive person. So in that regard, it's like, oh, less intelligent. Yeah, sure, scientifically. But in terms of like spiritual science and heart science, no, yeah, I'm you know, sure, I can accept where I can excel. And that's where being able to separate the two and really look at it and not just cancel culture everything out, right? When we actually get to look at the truth of what's there, then we're like, okay, well, that's not true, so I can leave that over there. And this is true, so I can use this as a point for generating thought. And then we look at, now, how does this help me in my spiritual journey? Is it helping me? If it's not helping me at all, leave it there. Throw it out. Release it. If it is helping you in some way, even if that's to say, well then, I want to become so spiritual that no one will ever be able to say that about me again, then sure, let it spur you on. Let it light that fire in your heart to say, well, then I'm going to find out everything I can about this person, this spiritual person, because what Krishna is telling Arjuna is, you could know all the things. You could do all the handstands. You could do all the fire sacrifices for thousands of years. Or you could be devotionally inclined with sincerity and authenticity. And that will give you the same results. And I know Arjuna's like, wait, the same? He's like, probably better results.
The same and more.
Yeah. You and Krishna is constantly giving us this assurance that you don't lose out. You don't lose out. And why? Because we weren't able to do all the things that they could do back then. Back then, you had sages and priests who could light fires with a mantra. I cannot do that. So in that regard, yes, I'm less intelligent. In that regard, yes, I am less equipped. But Krishna's like, and that doesn't matter to me at all. Are we in a relationship? Have you spoken to me today? That matters.
I was just trying to find a verse because you were saying about how you get all the same things and more. There's in one of the previous verses, Krishna saying how when if here, I think it's Yes, here it is. It's in 824. It says, so mystics who are advanced in yoga practice can arrange a time and place to leave their body. Right. So you know how we were talking earlier about what the hell, how do you control that? But certainly if you can, if you're an expert in mystic yoga, you can. Others have no control. If by accident they leave at an auspicious moment, then they will not return to the cycle of birth and death. But otherwise, there's every possibility that they will have to return. Oh, wait. There was a sentence, right? Okay, it's not here. There was a sentence where he said that if a mystic passes away in a certain condition, they will attain the moon planet, but they then have to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So this last verse, there are so many, all these other things that people are striving for. They give very elevated results, but not perfected results. And what is perfected? You can, another way you can look at that is eternal. And that's one of the flaws of the results that most of these austerities give you, is that they're temporary. And that you end up having to start again at a certain point. It's like you've saved up a load of money, and then now you're spending it, but at a certain point that money runs out. What Krishna is saying here, this last verse, he's saying there's no confusion. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of these results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. It's not like you miss out on anything. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all of these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. You get all of that and more.
Yeah.
So
And
very powerful.
I feel like that that kind of answers the question that we have in our hearts but are often too afraid to ask, which is, if I surrender, what happens to me? Does God want me to be poor? Do I lose out on all the look at that person? They're like, they have fame and money and all that stuff. They don't look surrendered. But if I surrender, what happens to me? And Krishna's like, what do you think happens to you? I take care of you. You get all those things. He's like, you don't miss out on the money and the fame and the abundance and the love and the acceptance just because you surrender to me. I don't want you to feel miserable. And that's the key. In that verse speaking about the moon, it says elevated souls in the purport live on the moon for about 10,000 years.
Which one is it?
By demigod calculations. This is verse 25.
25, okay.
So 10,000 celestial years. But they still come back. It's impermanent. And so you might think, oh, well, that person did a lot. And look, they're getting all the money and the fame and the celestial drinks. They got the good juice and all stuff. And Krishna's like, and you think that I would make a realm that didn't have all that and more? You really think? Like the person who has no lack, no deficiency. We've put our deficient mentality on God.
If we needed any more incentive, peeps. There we go. All right. What are you thinking and feeling, Acyuta? Is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we wrap up today's episode?
No, just that this one was a good one. It's a good one.
I also particularly enjoyed the last episode as well. Both. Today was, it's almost just take it for granted now. Come together and have an epic conversation, talk about some very cool stuff. What I liked about today was there was a lot of devil's advocate questions that came out today. And I love devil's advocate questions. You can call them devil's. I love genuine questions.
Yeah. And to me, they are just genuine. They don't have to be devil's advocate, but really, when we see someone who is combative, or how they say you should ask questions in a mood of submissive understanding. But when you see somebody asking questions in the opposite mood, right? It's like a they're trying to, like, an opponent. Most of the time it comes from a place of fear, really. It comes from, okay, what's the underlying fear here? What am I really hearing from this person? This person has some genuine concerns. Well, what does happen to me? You know, when people are like, oh, what's my assurance that God's actually going to take care of me if I do surrender? That sounds like a combative question. And it's like, oh, you don't really want to listen. But really, they're just afraid. They're literally like, no, but really, what does happen? How can I be assured that if I go all in and I put everything that I have, that I won't be abandoned like I've been abandoned by everybody else? Who's to say that God won't just try to oppress me, or God won't just abuse me like everybody else? Because, like we said, the triggers are real. Us projecting them onto the wrong people, the wrong situations, now that's something that needs some tweaking. But we have trauma. We've been mistreated. We've been abused, oppressed, and all these things. And the triggers are very real. But now we have to look at where we are placing them. Has this person actually done anything to deserve this treatment?
Beautiful. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 8th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of attaining the Supreme. Beautiful. That's how they end each chapter. This is the ending sentence of each chapter of the Gita. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport. So Bhaktivedanta was a title given to Srila Prabhupada. So his purports, his commentary to the 8th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of attaining the Supreme. That was the title of this chapter, Attaining the Supreme.
And because I've been hearing that, like, that line all my life, because it's not just in Bhagavad Gita, it's in Bhagavatam and so many books. Like, I have taken to jokingly adding that in when things, like, if a conversation even ends abruptly, I'm like, thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports on that. Like, I'm like taking to, like, throwing that in there.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually really funny if you think about it. If you, like, just insert that somewhere, and yeah. So it's a fun thing.
So it looks like in our next episode, we'll be starting chapter 9 of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And we'll be diving into the Bhaktivedanta purports of chapter 9, which is very cool, very exciting.
Now, Madhva, that you'd have been having a different guest each chapter. Are we here for this? Are we diving into chapter 9?
Are you here for this?
You know, I really like chapter 9.
I know. So I was going to talk to you about this afterwards, but we can talk about it right here in front of everyone if you like.
That's right. Yeah, you know, I think, you know, one more chapter. It can't hurt. One more chapter.
There we go. So we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Me and Acyuta, and we're going to go through chapter 9 together. And chapter 9, if you didn't know, like she just said, is Acyuta's favorite chapter. So if you think chapter 8 was good, imagine how good chapter 9 is going to be.
It gets
the most confidential knowledge. Yeah. Gets confidential. Woohoo! Check it out.
Did it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Acyuta. That really has made my evening. I was going to say, I was going to talk to you about it now to see if you wanted to, because I remember you saying that chapter 9 was your favorite chapter. I was going to put it to you and say, how do you feel? You want to go one more? But I know that you've been committed to so many of these episodes already. So I wanted to put it to you. But if you down, that's great news. That's fantastic. Super grateful. All right, so we can end on a happy note. We have to end on any sad tones today because I wasn't sure which way I was going to go. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. I hope that these are uplifting, that there's something that nourishes you that comes out of these episodes. That's our intention. That's what we're trying to do through this service. And I look forward to seeing you and discussing the next chapter with you in the next episode. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful week. And